Let's revisit my mind map from the first week of class. Here, there are different elements to make reading stronger. Comprehension is one of them. In my class, my students have a difficult time comprehending a story they read by themselves or read aloud to them. Through my observations, assessments, and discussions, I developed the following inquiry question. How can inference making help my second and third grade students develop narrative listening comprehension skills? Context. My plan of instruction is based on my inquiry question and the findings from my research article. My classroom is made up of second and third grade students ranging from 7 years old to 9 years old. My students are in a self-contained classroom. There is one teacher assistant, and 6 students. Each student is classified from a range of things such as communication impaired, other health impaired, cognitively impaired, and emotionally disturbed. My question will be teacher guided and student centered in a small group, no more of 3 students mixed together. Students will work in a familiar setting from the kidney table to the rug in front of the smartboard. Around those areas are anchor charts, whiteboard, and other tools to help students succeed. Purpose, goals, and objectives. My purpose for using this type of question is because my students lack comprehension skills and have a difficult time thinking beyond the text. Inference making is connected with developing a student's comprehension, as stated in my research article. Without being able to read between the lines, students cannot make deep connections with a text. My students, for example, have a hard time thinking outside the box because they are so used to finding the answers on the page they read or given to them. However, this does not help them develop a stronger sense of comprehension. My goals for my students are to use inferences as a reading comprehension strategy. As students listen to a text, I want them to visualize the story in their mind. My goal for them is to create mental images related to what they hear and the questions asked. Students should be able to connect the text to their background knowledge. Thus, this helps them create predictions, answer meaningful questions, and make conclusions. The objectives are as follows. Students will be able to recognize inference making is important to meaning and comprehension. Students will be able to understand how to make inferences by reading between the lines, develops their comprehension by answering questions and having discussions. Students will be able to make their own inferences about the text and record them on Post-its. Narrative description. The purpose of my lesson is to help my students understand and create inferences to comprehend a text better. My second and third grade students will be taught a reading mini lesson embedded with their whole group reading. It will be in a small group based on their individual skills and background knowledge they possess. This will help direct my lesson to their strengths and weaknesses. My students vary in skills from accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. My students will start the lesson at the kidney table with the teacher by the chart paper. My materials will already be present, such as the whiteboard markers, book, and chart paper. The following breaks down how my lesson will proceed. For the first 8 minutes of the lesson, I will have my introduction. What does it mean to make inferences about Mr. Tennant's Tie Trouble, the book my students are currently reading? Here, I will use a KWL chart to show what my students know about inferences and about the relation to the text, and what they want to know. Afterwards, I will check for understanding on whether or not they understand what inferences are by watching a BrainPop Jr. clip called Making Inferences. We will stop the clip halfway through after Anne, the little girl, discusses what inferences are and how she made some about the weather. I'll ask my students, how can I make inferences when I read? We will brainstorm together different ways we can make inferences while I'll chart it in a web. Inferences will be our center focus. From there, I will continue using the smartboard to review our vocabulary words, which will take about 10 minutes. There are 8 vocabulary words that I placed on the smartboard, 4 on a slide. They are covered by a colored box with the definition. I read the definition, give a clue, and my students guess the word. Once then, I reveal the box and we say the word together. The 8 vocabulary words currently are review, received, account, budget, disappointed, chuckled, staring, and repeated. Afterwards, we will move to the kidney table where we'll read our story together. I will engage with my students throughout the story. I'll read the title and ask my students what they think the story will be about. I'll write down their predictions on chart paper. Afterwards, we read a few pages, and then I stop and show them what I am thinking when I come to a word I do not know. I will work through it out loud to show how I infer meaning to different things. I'll continue to read a few more pages and stop to show the questions I want to ask myself about the characters, problem, and what will happen. As we read, I place sticky notes along with my students throughout the story. When we make an inference about the text, whether it's a vocabulary word or we realize something is going to happen. After that guided practice, we have 10 minutes of independent practice. My students will review the story and place their post-its on different parts they made inferences. Here we'll work together to ask questions about their post-its. I go one-on-one to my students and see if they really understood the meaning of inferences in that story. Our closure takes about 5 minutes. Here we revisit the KWL chart with my students placing their post-its on our chart in the What I Learned section. They come up, they read it out loud, and then they ask the other students if that is correct or if they would like to add anything else to that post-it. Reflection. As a result of creating the plan and conducting my lesson, I learned my students are able to piece the puzzle of inference making in their head in order to comprehend. When we started with our KWL chart, I was able to see where my lesson needed to go. We discussed the different things about inferences, what they think the story will be about, and the different questions they wanted answers for. The Brain Pop Junior clip helped my students understand the types of questions and thinking I wanted them to do. Moby and Ann really helped them relate to what inferences are because it talked about it on a kid-friendly level. While we read, they placed their post-its in the story with different questions, connections, and vocabulary words. My students were very eager and excited to actually have meaning, purpose, questions, and understanding of the story and wanted to express it on their post-it. Even my reluctant writer drew pictures because he was so excited he understood different meanings. Afterward, we placed all of the post-it notes on the KWL chart and the students explained the answers between the lines. I was surprised on how our chart looked because they finally put the pieces of the puzzle together to create a stronger sense of comprehension. Afterwards, I really started thinking about where my first original inquiry question could lead. I want to know, how can inference making create an assessment to test students on their comprehension skills? Would teachers design their own assessment, or would it be a district-wide assessment? So again, let's visit my mind map from the beginning of the semester. Comprehension is one of the many roots that make reading stronger. However, in order to have a solid sense of comprehension, inference making is important. Students can succeed and have a deeper sense of comprehension if they can make inferences about a story.